Hello there and a very good evening. Now, after months of heated debates and discussions from different quarters, the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, has finally presented the budget of the financial year 2023-2024, estimated at 3.6 trillion Kenyan shillings, the highest in the country's history. And tonight we'll be dissecting this particular budget and crunching these particular numbers with economic analyst Raphael Matu. Good evening, sir. Good to have you here today. And overall, in about a few, because we'll be getting into this conversation later, an overall view of this particular budget. 3.6 trillion, is it the way to go?
Thank you for having me. We will be able to go through the figures. I think it's a balancing act between expectations and reality.
I love it. Balancing between reality and expectations.
Yeah.
Definitely chiming into the conversation. TV47 News on Twitter, TV47KE on Facebook. Mine @Nyarengita _ all this particular 22047 is our SMS number. We'll be getting into this conversation in the tail end of the bulletin. So definitely chiming into the conversation. But first, to the highlights. Tonight, ESCC and education sector win big in the 2023-2024 budget.
The ultimate means of ensuring an equitable society is through investment in education.
Government allocates 27% of national government expenditure to the education sector. Also tonight, Azimio MPs staged a walkout during the budget presentation in Parliament.
Is to protest against the very, very arbitrary manner in which the debate and the final vote on the finance bill was undertaken yesterday.
The leaders claim they will soon present the people's budget. Plus, Kenyans poke holes into the 2023-2024 budget.
Waangalie tu mwananchi wa kawaida, yani ule ako chini. Ndio unaona sasa kama wale sisi tunakuja kuhaso, hatutegemei mshahara ya mtu.
They say it is not hustler friendly. Welcome to the bulletin. Catherine Simalo is on the sign language docket. I'm used to Stanley Nyuringita. Now, the education sector has taken the largest chunk of the 3.68 trillion shillings of the 2023-2024 budget, with an allocation of 628.6 billion shillings. Now, this is far above the combined allocations for health, agriculture, security, and the executive office of the president. However, various education stakeholders say more reforms need to be initiated in the sector. Here is Sharon Baranga with a breakdown of how the monies have been distributed within various departments in the education sector.
With every budget reading, the education sector takes the biggest slice of the pie. This year is no different. The sector has received 628 billion shillings, a 10% increase compared to the previous budget. And while this is a welcome move, education stakeholders feel a lot more needs to be done.
The Kenya Kwanza commitment to education seemed to flip-flop in the sense that right now there are quite a number of learners who do not have teachers, and we've not seen the government of the day address the plight of these particular learners. What we saw is the formation of the Working Party on Education. They made recommendations. Those recommendations have not been made public. We do not see any other concerted effort in addressing some of these particular challenges that are bedeviling the education sector, and therefore the allocation of 627 billion shillings is welcome, but there is a lot of reforms which should be initiated in the education sector.
Reports of schools sending learners home to collect fees following the delayed disbursement of capitation funds have hit the headlines in the recent past, raising concerns.
As much as this allocation is being made to the education sector, we understand that there has been several delays in the sense that principals will go for a whole month without receiving capitation. We understand this is as a result of budgetary constraint, but sometimes we put these principals in very difficult positions in the sense that we parents give them children and the principals do not have the resources they're supposed to have to provide food, to provide water, to provide board of management teachers to these particular students.
In the 2023-2024 budget, 12.5 billion shillings has been set aside for free primary education. 65.4 billion shillings will go to free day secondary education, including insurance under NHIF for secondary school learners. 25.5 billion shillings has been allocated for junior secondary school, and 5 billion shillings will be used to support examination fee waiver.
The ultimate means of ensuring an equitable society is through investment in education as part of human capital development. For this reason, the government will continue to address inequalities in our education system so as to level the playing field for all children, irrespective of their background.
Another 4.8 billion shillings will be used to recruit 20,000 intern teachers. 1.1 billion shillings has been set aside for promotion of teachers, and 41.3 billion shillings will be used for training of teachers on the competency-based curriculum. The Teacher Service Commission will receive 316.7 billion shillings.
There is some duplication in the education sector. A lot of money is being used to pay people who are doing a similar job. A good example is the Teacher Service Commission. We have county and sub-county officers of the Teacher Service Commission. We have the officers from the Ministry of Education at the county and the sub-county level. They are doing the same job of quality assurance, of ensuring curriculum implementation. We should harmonize these particular roles. Instead of having the Ministry of Education and the TSC paying people to go and do similar jobs, we can save the taxpayers' money by ensuring that these particular people, we have one particular center of power.
Sharon Baranga, TV47.
Right, I was an education reporter right there. That is how the education sector is basically looking at. And the big question lies, is it a budget or a burden? And what are Kenyans really feeling about it? And the cost of living in the country exacerbated by a spike in rising cost of food items, electricity and gas, among other essential commodities, has elicited mixed reactions among Kenyans and members of parliament. Now, even as Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndungu says that made his maiden budget presentation in the parliament on Thursday.
President William Ruto's maiden budget may seem convincing to the eyes of many Kenyans as far as development projects are concerned. But a section of Kenyans believe the head of state's strategy to collect more than 2 trillion shillings from their pockets is punitive and uncalled for.
Hatima ya ile 3.3 trillion ya mwaka jana haikutimizwa kwa sababu tukisikia katika kaunti za ugatuzi tunasikia bado kuna arrears. Hii arrears ijadhibitishwa kufikia kalenda wa muhula huu, na leo tumeongeza tena ingine 250 billion. So ni kama tunaishi beyond our means.
Mama wa mboga wapate kitu ya kukula. Sasa hiyo wanatuambia 15% ya kujengea nyumba. Sisi tunakaa huko mtaani huko chini huko. Unanijengea nyumba gani na ninakaa kitu kama inakaa kama stall tu ndio ninakalia ndani.
The latest data by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics shows that year-on-year inflation has raised to 8% in May from 7.9% in April. Kenya Kwanza parliamentarians, however, says the more than 300 billion shillings increment in this financial year's budget is aimed at strengthening Kenyans' lifestyles as well as shooting down the rising inflation in the country.
Tumeona kwamba ameweka karibu bilioni 8 kuhakikisha kwamba zile sokoni ambazo zilikuwa zimesimamishwa na hazikuwa zimejengwa, ameweka pesa kuhakikisha zimemalizishwa.
Tukienda katika that reading itakuwa hivyo hivyo. Hii bunge wakati tutakubaliana sisi wote, I think wa Kenya hawatakuwa pahali mzuri. Ni vizuri tunatarajia ya kwamba demokrasia tunakuwa na watu wanafanya hivi lakini kunakuwa pia na idadi ya kukosoa.
Owing to this, some households are adapting to the high cost of living by, among others, skipping meals.
Kwa sababu imekuwa tumesukumwa chini instead tuenda juu. Tuliambiwa ni bottom up. Sasa tunakushindwa. Unga ilikuwa 200 itoke 200 iende 400 ama ni ishuke itoke 200 ikuje 100.
Kama si kuuza hivi chai hakuna vile naisafanya. Tunahangaika sana, tunamwambia tushukishie vitu.
Amid all this, the public is apprehensive of the proposed finance bill of 2023 that in among others fronts a 1.5% housing levy and an increase of 8% on VAT for petroleum products, saying it will make the cost of living unbearable.
The issue of fuel affects transport. Now, transport now trickles down to everything because anybody coming to the market, anybody bringing any good or going anywhere has to incur transport expenses.
Public participation ilimaanisha kwamba hiyo bila ingepita. Lakini sasa jua wabunge wetu wameka ulafi mingi ndani. So na hiyo style njia ambayo uchaguzi ilifanywa nayo pia. So hakuna watu walijipeleka matumbo zao peke yao huko. Ongeza na mdomo, pesa pako uwe na pesa. Pesa sisi wenyewe anategemea sisi na tuna pesa.
The proposed finance bill is expected to generate revenue of more than 289 billion shillings and stimulates the country's economic growth by an estimated 6%. National Assembly Budget Committee Chairperson Dede Nyoro, however, says this will not affect Kenyans in relation to what the government aims to collect compared to what it will borrow from outside.
All the things in the budget, all the things that we intend to do is to make sure as we grow our economy, we are not just growing the top, we are growing everyone. Those people who have an opportunity to do business must be capacitated to do business.
Now, after a presentation of the 2023-2024 budget at the National Assembly, now all eyes shifts to the National Assembly to understand on which ways exactly the government will use to collect taxes as proposed in the Finance Bill of 2023-2024 in order to attain its goals in this fiscal year. Mike Kagwongo, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you for that, Kagongo. And a section of Kenyans have criticized the 2023-2024 budget, terming it punitive. Majority of Kenyans who spoke to TV47 expressed their disappointment with Ruto's plan to stabilize the economy, saying it is hurting the pockets. Our reporter Paul Kirobi spent time with Amama Mboka and a security guard in Kangemi area here in Nairobi and dissected through the hustlers' budget.
The Kenya Kwanza administration maiden budget for the financial year 2023-2024 seems to be far away from elevating the living standards of the so-called hustlers, with the majority of them feeling left out, saying the 2023-2024 financial budget will rip them off their hard-earned money. Majority of them, who largely contribute to the growth of Kenya's economy, will be forced to dig deeper into their pockets to finance the budget. We visited Kangemi Market within the city of Nairobi County, where most of these hustlers conduct their businesses. Here we meet Rebecca Wawera, a tomato seller who makes a profit of 500 shillings daily after spending the whole day under the sun. She says she cannot save anything from her earnings due to the high cost of living.
Sasa wanafaa zile vitu tunatumia kila siku, hiyo matumishi yetu ya kila siku angalau ikue ya chini kidogo, ndio tuweze kutimiza zile majukumu tuko nazo. Ukienda kama ni kwa hizo unga, so sukari, angalau sirudi chini.
As we continue to traverse the streets of Kangemi, we also meet Consolata Kemunto. She sells vegetables here. She tells me it's difficult to make ends meet. Her business is not doing well at the moment, following the high cost of living. Prices of basic commodities, she says, continue to swell. Out of the 500 shillings, she's left with 300 shillings, money she saves in order to pay school fees for her children and cater for other expenses.
Kwa hivyo kama budget ya saa hii, serikali yetu ingeangalia sana, ingeangalia watu wa chini kabisa, iangushe unga ndio mboga ipate kununuliwa, ndio tusipate hasara kubwa sana. At least hata sisi tuweke kitu ya kuwekesha ya kutusaidia kesho.
Same script but different cast. Jacinta Mwikali sells chapati here. She tells me she only makes 300 shillings a day, making it difficult to feed her family, pay rent and school fees.
Ile yenye ninauza inafinyilia ile yenye ninapata. Sasa hakuna ya kusave. Juu ninaweza taka kusave. lakini siwezi save. Inapata nakula yote kwa sababu nikienda kwa duka vitu instead nipate ziko ile bei nilipata njana napata imeongezeka.
Alan Swima is an employed Kenyan working at a security firm. Even though he gets a salary of 10,000 shillings, the challenge is the same. The situation that has now forced him to apply for loans in order to finance some of his expenses, including taking children to school.
Hata na hakuna kitu inatusaidia. Hiyo tuseme tu ni ile umetuletea mzigo ingine kubwa. Kwa hiyo nikichukua leo kesho, ndakana nilipe, nisipolipa sitachukua, limit itateremka. Sina za hata sitapewa.
In Mombasa County, where a majority of people flock to enjoy their holidays, residents have criticized the Ruto-led administration, saying the government has deserted them.
While President William Ruto's administration is keen on raising more revenue to finance the 2023-2024 budget, majority of Kenyans, more so small-scale traders, have little to smile about, and their only hope lies within 4-year window before the next general election. Paul Kirobi, TV47, Kangemi, Nairobi.
Thank you for that, Kirobi. Now let's focus on the winners and the losers in this particular budget. Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u Thursday presented President William Ruto's 3.68 trillion maiden budget. Now, ESC and users of LPG gas are the biggest winners as government proposed amendments to the VAT Act to zero-rate liquefied petroleum gas. And as Moiga William reports, Ndung'u maintained that Kenya Kwanza's maiden budget will better the life of the common mwananchi at the bottom of the pyramid and at the same time stimulate the country's economy.
Presenting Kenya Kwanza's budget policy statement for the 2023-2024 financial year, set to commence 1st of July amid a hue and cry from different quarters, Cabinet Secretary, Treasury and Economic Planning Njuguna Ndung'u took his time to enumerate the gains that Kenya will sow if the august House okays the government proposals. Ndung'u highlighted key 5 areas of focus prioritized by the Ruto-led government. In the run-up to the 2022 general election, Ruto, the then deputy president, did put more emphasis on the country's agricultural sector, Ndung'u telling legislators of the allocations to go to the sector in a bid to improve it, where 5 billion has been allocated to fertilizer subsidy, 8.6 billion to the National Agricultural Value Chain Development, 2.7 billion for National Agricultural and Rural Inclusive, also 2.1 billion for Kenya Cereal Enhancement, 2.8 billion emergency locust response, and 1.4 billion small-scale irrigation and value addition.
Currently, tea purchased for local value addition, either from the factories or tea auction centers, is vatable, affecting the cash flow of the tea exporters. In order to encourage local value addition of our tea, I propose to the National Assembly to remove VAT on tea purchased from factories or tea auction centers for value addition and subsequent export.
Focusing on MSMEs, Ndung'u noted the plans to ease the cost of doing business and minimize compliance cost for the sector. The Competition Authority of Kenya will exclude the MSME sector from merger notifications, thus enabling startups and digital businesses.
To amend the VAT Act to exempt transfer of business as a going concern. This is expected to encourage mergers and acquisition, hence boost growth of businesses as well as their efficiency.
Turning the focus on one of the contentious issues in the Finance Bill 2023, the housing debate, Njuguna Ndung'u reiterated the government's commitment to turn the housing challenge into an economic opportunity and create quality jobs, stating that this will be achieved by facilitating the delivery of 250,000 houses per annum and urging the National Assembly to effect the budget allocation of 35.2 billion for the housing program.
The cost of housing is a heavy burden to the majority of Kenyans, and is the main factor driving the proliferation of slums in the country. The government's commitment is to turn the housing challenge into an economic opportunity to create quality jobs for our over 100,000 young people graduating from TVETs every year.
Also, the National Treasury has allocated the Hustler Fund 10 billion shillings, 182.2 million to the Women Fund, 175 million shillings to the Youth Fund, and 192 million shillings to the Wezo Fund.
At the heart of the government's development agenda is the inclusion in society and employment opportunities for the vulnerable groups, vulnerable members of the society. In this regard, I propose to the National Assembly to effect a budget allocation of Kenya shillings 38.2 billion for the social protection and affirmative actions in this budget.
Defending Ruto's tax measures, which has caused an uproar in parts of the country, the man in charge of the country's economy stated the government will upscale revenue collection efforts to a target of 4 trillion over the medium term, as the fiscal deficit will be financed through net external financing of 131.5 billion and net domestic financing of 586.5 billion, adding Kenya's public debt remains sustainable but with elevated risk of debt distress, though noting the government is committed to honoring all public debt obligation as they fall due.
Guided by the best practice, the government intends to change the public debt ceiling from a numerical number to a debt anchor in the form of a ratio of public debt to GDP in present value terms.
Cabinet Secretary for Treasury Njuguna Ndung'u defending Kenya Kwanza's inaugural budget, stating that it aims at stimulating the country's economy, but more so to help better the lives of the common mwananchi, who he referred to as the one at the bottom of the pyramid. Mwige William for TV47 at the Parliament buildings, Nairobi.
Many thanks for that, Mwige William. Now let's get into the politics that played out in the Parliament buildings. And the Azimio One Kenya MPs were on no-show during the 2023-2024 budget presentation in Parliament Thursday after they stormed out of chambers, terming the process illegitimate. Further, Azimio MPs accused Speaker Moses Wetangula of misinformation on the finance bill voting exercise, saying he denied their members an opportunity to exercise the constitutional right, now threatening to challenge the finance bill in court, as Elizabeth Mutuku tells us.
As it is the norm, Treasury CS Professor Njuguna Ndung'u arrived in Parliament 2:30 p.m. under tight security, flanked by Cabinet Secretaries and Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi.
It's a very important village in this country.
As soon as the plenary session commenced, Minority Whip Junet Mohammed and Rarieda MP Otiende Amolo rose on point of order, taking on the Speaker over yesterday's voting exercise on the finance bill, which was voted for during the second reading, though Wetangula turned a blind ear on their pleas.
Discussing. It is my understanding that if we go that way, then it means we have dispensed with the presentation of the budget proposal by the Cabinet Secretary, in which case I will seek your guidance on why the business you had indicated that will be undertaking from 3 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's not against any law. I hear somebody saying that you participated in the court case that rendered the standing order negatory. So what we are doing is procedural, and we are not in any way flouting any standing order.
This forcing the Azimio Brigade to storm out of the plenary session, chanting liberation songs, expressing their displeasure on yesterday's turn of events. Minority Leader Opiyo Wandayi and the Azimio faction accused Speaker of misinforming MPs on voting exercise on the Finance Bill 2023, as the debate on the bill was to go on till next week.
To conduct the business of the House amidst chaos, which is against the provision of the standing orders. In fact, he went ahead to call for a vote when most of us were on our feet, calling for a division. So we think that vote was procedural, was irregular, and was therefore inconclusive. And for that reason, we have got no justification. There's no basis whatsoever for us to sit through that hopeless statement being made today by Mr. Njuguna Ndung'u.
The National Assembly confirmed that the debate would be had on yesterday morning, yesterday afternoon, and today the whole morning. You all had it. And suggested, including in consultation, that the voting would come next week on Tuesday. Exactly. For that reason, it is inconceivable that a member could stand under Standing Order 95 and the Speaker accedes to stop debate and go to the voting. That is the irregularity that our leader of minority is talking about. It is improper to mislead members of parliament, to mislead the media, and to mislead the nation. And that is part of the issue we have with these whole procedures.
Further, the Azimio Brigade termed 2023 budget not mwananchi oriented, saying a huge chunk of budget goes to executive and offices owned by a few powerful individuals in the government, poking holes in the budget making process.
Alafu wanawake wao, mabibi zao, wana mabajeti yao kando. Yote wa Kenya ndio wanaingia kwenye mfuko. Sisi tumekataa na tunasema tutasimama na wananchi. Liwe litakalokuwa, hata kama tutabaki wawili pale ndani ya bunge, lakini tutasimama na wananchi. Hii bajeti tumeikataa na leo ndio maana sisi tumesusia, hatutaki kusomewa bajeti ambayo sisi hatukuipitisha.
Sema msipoipunguza, mkaieneza hivi, watafunga virago vyao, wataenda mainchi jirani. Inchi inaelekea wapi? Mbona mnaichukua kama mchezo, kama utani? Wananchi majority wameikataa. Wale wote ambao wameikubali ni wachache. Tunajua ukweli. Hata wengi hapa walipiga kura kwa sababu wanaogopa, wametishwa na vyama vyao na mkubwa wa
President William Ruto's maiden budget has finally been presented in Parliament amid back and forth on the Finance Bill 2023, with Azimio likely headed to court. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47, Palm Beach, Nairobi.
Right, good work, Elizabeth Mutuku. Now, the Cabinet Secretary for National Planning and Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, has officially presented Kenya Kwanza's first budget to Parliament. But before getting down to the serious matter awaiting him at Parliament, Professor Ndung'u did not depart from tradition, making the traditional ceremonial slow drive from the National Treasury headquarters to Parliament buildings just a street away. TV47's Flora Limuki was on hand to capture the details just for you.
After hours of waiting and getting ready, rehearsing and polishing up the 2023-2024 budget, the man of the hour, the Cabinet Secretary for National Planning and Treasury, finally walked out of his office situated at the National Treasury building in the heart of the city.
And now request the directors to proceed to the designated vehicle.
A quite relaxed CS, seemingly excited about the maiden budget for Kenya Kwanza government led by President William Ruto. Flanking him like watchful custodians were the outgoing and incoming central bank governors Patrick Njoroge and Kamau Thuge. Professor Ndung'u, with the legendary briefcase, taking the traditional photos before heading to the Parliament building to read the estimate budget. But not without some distraction from those unhappy with the state of the economy. Finally, CS Ndung'u found his way to the Parliament buildings, where he was received by the Speaker, ready for the moment every Kenyan was waiting for, as Kenyans digest the details of the large budget, Kenya's largest yet. Professor Ndung'u has his work cut out for him for sure. With Kenya's debt almost hitting the 9 trillion mark, stakeholders observed that the Treasury urgently needs alternative ways to raise revenue apart from borrowing.
Let's look for other ways to grow our economy, to finance our needs, but without taking more debt. Because, you know, debt is not just about the current generation. It's about the future generation. And we must be fair to the future generation by not taking too much debt now, and then they struggle in the future.
This 3.6 trillion shilling budget coming at a time when Kenyans are already bearing the brunt of the high cost of living. Flora Limuki, TV47.
Most definitely spot on, as Flora Limuki reports. This particular budget comes at a time Kenyans are bearing the brunt of the high cost of living, and these particular details we'll be getting later on with Rafael Matu, an economic analyst. After this particular short break, stick around.
For the biggest of guests, from politicians to entertainers to content creators to whichever kind of a person you want to think that you'd want to see on the show, this is the place to be. Dr. Funike tonight.
Each and every Wednesday. My name is DJ Lizney, not your ordinary DJ.
And of course, they call me the eagle himself. Your host, Dr. Funike, is my name. Of course, every Wednesday at 7:30. See you then. Don't touch.
Make sure to join us.
Tell your landlord as well. Jua unalipia parent.
Sikose.
From politics, health, cooking, relationships, and entertainment, join Linda Alela every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. only on Morning Cafe.
Your health is not just about going to the hospital. Your health is about prevention, it's about what you eat, it's about where you live. For this reason, the Body Garage Show exists.
The part of the brain that deals with communication.
Called primary hypertension, which means that we don't find a reason for that.
Join me, Dr. Chepsi, every Thursday, 8 p.m.
Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Beyond the Limit. We have not even scratched the surface when it comes to knowledge about disability. Beyond the Limit with me, Zainab Mohammed, every Saturday at 7:30 p.m.
You know what pops in my house more than the rainbow? Walls. You know what I love between me and him? Space. Don't worry, dishes. No one is doing me either. Hey, not much. Just hanging around. Pull yourself together. Enough on the jokes. Let's talk about real estate. Catch The Realtor every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m.
Want to learn?
For the first step, we are going to draw the balloons. As you can see, we have balloons on our birthday cards.
Have fun. Then catch Kids on the Block every Saturday at 9 a.m.
For the biggest of guests, from politicians to entertainers to content creators to whichever kind of a person you want to think that you'd want to see.
34 minutes past the top of the hour. Remember, we'll be having a conversation on matters breaking down this particular budget 2023-2024. But before that, Kenya, alongside neighbors Tanzania, Uganda and Rwanda, on Thursday presented the 2023-2024 budgets before the respective parliaments, in line with an East African Community plan to do so in tandem. A key aspect of the budgets basically was that also in tandem was the reality that almost all these countries expect overall national government spending to rise in the upcoming financial year. Andrew Kilimi reports.
As Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u delivered a 3.6 trillion budget to Kenyans Thursday, other East African countries, including Tanzania, Uganda and Rwanda, also released their annual budgets as per decision of the EAC Sectoral Council on Finance and Economic Affairs. Burundi is set to follow suit on June 19th. The Uganda government proposed an estimated budget of 52.7 trillion Uganda shillings, which translates to 1.9 trillion Kenya shillings. Out of the 52.7 trillion shillings, Uganda budget estimates for the year 2023-2024 29.67 trillion Uganda shillings or 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings was allocated to domestic revenue, 31.16 trillion Uganda shillings or 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings to domestic borrowing, 2.78 trillion Uganda shillings or 105.3 billion Kenya shillings to budget support, and 8.2 trillion Uganda shillings or 312.9 billion shillings to external financing. Tanzanian government allocated a whopping 10.48 trillion Tanzania shillings or 609 billion Kenya shillings to service the national debt in the financial year 2023-2024. The amount is a 15% rise from the 9.1 trillion that the Tanzanian Parliament approved for paying the loans that the government took from various sources. Rwanda's economic growth is projected to slow to 6.2% in 2023 compared to 8.2% in 2022 owing to global uncertainties, and by 6.7% and 7% in 2024 and 2025 respectively. Mainly, the budget allocations for the EAC focuses on sectors such as education, science, health, and judiciary, with an emphasis on economic growth and climate change resilience. Andrin Kilemi, TV47.
Right, thank you, Kilemi, for that. Now, time to get into a conversation tonight. Basically, what is inside this particular budget and dissecting the budget. It was a whole 3 hours and 20 minutes, give or take 20 minutes, by a speech when a presentation by the Cabinet Secretary of Treasury, that is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. So this basically tells you that a lot is really contained in this particular budget. But then right here with us is economic analyst Raphael Matu. Just to reintroduce you again, and when we had started, I'd asked you an overall of this budget, and you said, if I remember well, reality and expectations, right?
Yes.
Break it down for us. Reality and expectations. First of all, is this budget friendly to the common mwananchi?
Thank you, Stanley, for having me in the studio. I think, like I said earlier, so we are trying to create a balance between expectations and reality.
Yes.
In terms of expectations, it is not going to make Wanjiku happy. In terms of reality, I think we have to admit that we have some economic challenges that we have to address. It is high time now we admit that we have been affected by global factors. We have been affected by drought. We have been affected by the depreciation of the Kenyan shillings. And therefore, moving forward, then we have to admit that as a country, we have to consolidate and move forward and try to look for solutions for the problems. Maybe the only challenge is, of course, Wanjiku could have expected some immediate kind of solutions, especially to the high cost of living.
Okay.
And if you look at the budget, maybe there were no really immediate kind of solutions, but maybe some medium term or maybe long term kind of solutions. Yeah.
And even, talking to pundits, they say that basing on the whole speech, it is, in short, Kenyans should really be preparing to tighten the belts. And just to quote what he said in his particular speech, as part of the economic turnaround plan, the government will scale up revenue collections by KRA to a target of 4.0 trillion Kenyan shillings over the medium term. In order to achieve this, the government is undertaking a combination of both tax administrative measures and tax policy reforms. Brings me back to what you're talking about, expectations. Is this too much of an ambitious expectation? Right now, it is about 2-point-something trillion. So basically, they really have to hit 1.6 thereabout, trillion to hit the 4.0 trillion. This is an institution that is receiving rather under a new government.
Yes.
Is this too much of an ambitious plan, even for the CS himself?
So I think what I mean is that planning is one thing, and making the plans turn to be a reality becomes another. So as per the budget, of course, there are serious targets, as we have said, especially in terms of revenue collection. And these targets, again, if you look at the tax proposals which were given later, we need also to look at the economy and see, is this economy strong enough to be able to raise the kind of revenue targets that we are giving KRA? So I think, like I've said, putting policies and putting the plans is one thing, but how practical these targets are going to be is something else.
All right.
Yeah.
So do you feel like KRA is up to the task? Is the taxman up to the task in achieving these targets?
My feeling, of course, is there is going to be a lot of pressure on KRA. There's also going to be a lot of pressure on Kenyans to comply. And again, when probably if we put in too much pressure, maybe we become a bit harsh or maybe confrontational, there could also be a possibility that Kenyans may have to try and reinvent maybe ways of avoiding taxes. So therefore, I think as they try to go for the targets, then they have to know how to really approach the taxpayer so that we don't find the policies again becoming counterproductive.
Which actually reminds me back, I think recently when President visited the KRA buildings and he faulted the staff, and he's saying, some of you are really helping outsiders to, evade this particular tax. What does this really bring into the institute itself? Does it, bring in fear into the people who work here? They really feel like we are being monitored and micromanaged by the executive, and we don't really have the independency that we should have.
Yeah, so I think it is a bad thing, of course, to try to really intimidate the officials. They need a lot of support from the government. They need to make sure that we have also proper policies, which of course will really enable KRA to be able to collect, because there has to be proper framework. Even as we give these tax proposals, do we have proper framework to make sure that, yes, you have raised taxes on these areas, you have zero-rated some, but are there proper policies to make sure that all these targets, because every policy, of course, is trying to target a certain revenue point. So for us to be able to achieve that, do we have the proper framework and do we have the proper support from the government?
So basically, much as KRA, we give it time and see how it shapes it.
Yeah.
As a finance advisor yourself, I believe this really is, you're the best person to actually give us guidance on this.
Okay.
So today, and we did also hear this from the PS Treasury Rotich, and even today, the CS Treasury, Prof. Njuguna Ndungu, talked about it largely, much as the debt ceiling.
Yes.
And so just to quote it again, guided by the best practice, the government intends to change the debt ceiling from a numerical number to debt anchor in the form of a ratio of public debt to GDP in present value terms. It provides an appropriate guide for the optimal level of public debt based on the country's ability to pay. Does this change the way we do things in the country? The National Treasury has capped it at 55%. Does this change the way we do things as a country, not having the debt ceiling according to how it is in numerical terms, numerical figures basically? And again, does this open loopholes? Because again, I believe now this opens up the possibility of the government borrowing extensively.
Yeah, so the figure is trying to look at, we call it as a debt anchor. So we are moving from maybe when we state a figure like we say maximum of 10 trillion. And now we are saying, should we take a certain percentage maybe to GDP? And as you are saying, maybe there could be a possibility that it can open up some loopholes, especially if at all maybe, for example, we play around with the GDP figures, or maybe and again, one other thing is that at times it's not very clear to get precisely what are the really figures for the government debt. So it can really open up, can really open some loopholes. I think the argument from the CS was like, if you give, for example, we say 60% of the GDP is our debt anchor, then should we exceed maybe to around 65%, then we can only say as a country, maybe we are not doing very well. Should we maybe go to around 55? We say we still maybe have room. Okay, so I think it allows maybe probably the government really to play around within a certain range, just like the way we play around with the inflation targeting and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only issue, of course, could be if maybe we could play around with the GDP figures. Like maybe we could be talking about debasing. At times we debase these figures, and they take a slightly different dimension than maybe what maybe we have currently. So in such a scenario, then it can give us maybe a wider space, maybe probably to borrow.
But then, Matu, right now, this particular proposal, it is a bill. It is, in the face of public participation. Do you expect opposition, and a large kind of opposition, the same that we did see in the Finance Bill 2023? Do you expect such an opposition? Because I remember, having the same. It was actually proposed last year, and there was actually it was actually shot down. Now, for this year, do you expect the same, it to be shot down?
So I think so far, what we are witnessing now is like kind of a different approach, or maybe perspective between Parliament and the National Assembly and the public, because maybe majority of the people are interpreting it very differently. But of course, if it was the people who were to decide, maybe probably they would interpret it or would decide differently. But maybe based on how things are moving in Parliament, it could be, there's a possibility that it definitely has to go through.
So you actually feel like it might actually sail through?
Yeah.
Does this help common mwananchi or the investors who in their own framework and all that, who does it benefit mostly?
So like I said earlier, in fact, implementation is really where the challenge comes in. And like I said, we're in a point where by now we have to decide between expectations and the reality. Of course, for common mwananchi, they had their own expectations, and I think most of them are also stemming from their political background and the political promises. But again, now when we of course, Kenya Kwanza gets into government, they realize that things now are totally very different from what we really promised. So now trying to make the public, or maybe the masses, change their mind, of course, is quite difficult. And the other thing, of course, is that, yes, we also understand what the masses are going through. The cost of living is quite very high. Life is a bit quite hard. Lack of jobs and many other things. So from both sides, the government is trying to push maybe its agenda on one end, and maybe still the masses, we understand the feelings, the pain, and what they're going through.
Let me take you back in 2014 when the National Assembly approved about over 200 billion of the Eurobond.
Yes.
10 years later, next year now, 24th of June, it will mature. It is due for maturity, and the National Treasury has, proposed that, bringing in, an advisor to, advise the government, a lead manager, basically, to basically advise. What kind of advice should the lead manager, per se, the National Treasury picked Matu to be the lead manager advising the government on this? What key areas will you be, plucking out and, picking on to the table for such? And this basically largely talks about our loans, debt servicing and all this.
Okay. So I think, first of all, is the government is sending a message that it is maybe in the process of borrowing. I think that is one way of trying to say it indirectly. But now maybe assuming, yes, we get the lead advice, and I think will help maybe probably in terms of negotiations, maybe in terms of the terms that will come, of course, with because it's basically a debt. So every debt has terms, conditions, which maybe probably can be negotiated, and maybe even the time frame and the rates and so forth. I think maybe those could be some of the things the lead advisor could be giving, although I still believe that even the government themselves, they have the technical capacity to do that.
Right, Raphael, because of time, allow me to wrap up this particular conversation here, but definitely it doesn't end here. We'll be having this particular kind of conversations right about here. Director, I will kindly allow just about 10 seconds for your closing remarks.
Yes.
Kindly. About 10 seconds, your closing remarks as we wrap up.
My closing remarks is that for Kenyans, let's embrace for tougher times. For the government on the other side, let's try to listen to the Kenyans and try to focus on what is likely to be an immediate solution, especially on the high cost of living. Most people are expecting to hear something that is immediate for now. The long-term processes should come as we move forward, right. But there was need for immediate actions that can really bring down the cost of living.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your wise words right here and everything that you have actually told us. Raphael Martin, economic analyst.